Chapter 1. The Scoop of the Year. Lilly. Newman snapped me out of my daydream in a sharp tone. The old, grumpy editor-in-chief was sitting at the head of the long conference table and had a clear view of all the employees. "Do you have something for us?" "Yes, I do," I said defiantly, and with a heavy heart, I shook off the fantasy of Mr. Wright, who I had just bumped into at the supermarket. A wave of relief swept through the room. The editors breathed a sigh of relief and leaned back in their office chairs. No wonder. We had already suggested so many articles and topics that we were slowly running out of material. Newman had proved to be a poisonous little barker who had torn up most of the ideas right from the start. So the story is... No, Lilly. How many times do I have to say that? Keep it short, please. Just tell me the headline. Newman interrupted me and pushed back his glasses, which were constantly threatening to slip off his nose. Breitscheidplatz is not effectively secured against a new attack, I said, trying to present the news as dramatically as possible. Silence filled the room. All eyes turned to the executioner, who was about to pass judgment on my headline. Newman grimaced as if he had bitten into a lemon. Scandal, I followed up. Breitscheidplatz is not secured. Is there a threat of another attack? Okay, go on, Newman snorted, to my surprise, and ran his hand over his mouth thoughtfully. Well, that's how it is, I explained. 1 year after the attack, the Berlin Senate still hasn't protected Breitscheidplatz against trucks breaking through. The Senator of the Interior obviously has no plans to do so, I said, wiping a blonde strand of hair from my face. This morning he said on the radio on 105.5, and I quote, "It won't help us to pollute Berlin with bollards," end of quote. But that's complete nonsense. The American embassy is also bollarded. The fact is, the square is not protected. That's not true, intervened Fiona, an editor with long brown curly hair and a particular penchant for red nails and miniskirts. There are concrete barriers everywhere. I saw them myself last week. Triumphantly, she gave me a venomous look. Fiona and I had been enemies ever since we had once fought over the same man. She had won, but only because she had convinced him that I was actually a lesbian and only needed a boyfriend so that my parents wouldn't disinherit me. That was complete nonsense, of course, but the guy had actually believed it. Yes, there are some posts standing around, I said, unimpressed, but they can't stop a truck. Steel posts, on the other hand, which are anchored deep in the ground, can. Newman furrowed his brow. Well, I don't know. Is this the scandal that everyone wants to read about in the Baz? That was the crucial question. Our paper, the Berliner Allgemeine Zeitung, Baz, had been struggling with falling circulation for months. The publisher of the Baz, Dr. Rodgert, had already threatened to downsize our editorial team if circulation and advertising revenue didn't pick up soon. And so, Newman drummed us up every other day, early in the morning, to discuss hot topics that would bring us the circulation we were hoping for. Isn't an unsecured Christmas market almost to be expected in a catastrophically governed city like Berlin? Newman added. He laughed briefly. I mean, hey, I love this city. I was born here. But honestly, the Berlin Senate is completely incompetent. They can't get anything done. Or am I wrong? Nobody cares about Breitscheidplatz, Fiona interjected snippily, looking at her red nails as if in love. That's not true, I shouted angrily. Everyone's interested. The Christmas markets will be opening soon and people will be wondering what's happened since the attack. Nobody cares, Fiona repeated stubbornly. So, you have something better to offer, Fiona. I'm glad to hear that. Just speak up. Newman pushed back his glasses and gave her an expectant look. Fiona sighed and sat up straight. All right then. How about this? Airport boss gets bogged down in side job. No, please not BER. Newman waved it off. The only headline people want to hear about the new airport is BER is open. Everything else is just to be ashamed of and run away from. He slumped down in his chair and ran a hand over his face, straining. Okay, go on. An awkward silence ensued. It was so quiet that you could hear Newman's snorting and slightly rattling breathing noise, which he had been carrying around with him for 2 years, since he suffered a heart attack. You would have thought he had mutated into some kind of Darth Vader. His small, piercing eyes darted back and forth attentively, taking turns to focus on the editors. Newman waited until the silence became unbearable. I could imagine what he was thinking. Sir and Madam Editors should feel bad. It's only fair. Those who don't contribute anything should suffer a little. That's all? Really? Newman asked the group. Well, when I was still a young journalist, I was just shooting around with ideas. I could have filled the newspaper all by myself. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not how it works. Now, give us a break. We've already suggested so much, protested Betty, one of the most experienced members of the editorial team. That's right, Betty, Newman cut her off. But unfortunately, the ideas were garbage, especially yours. Sorry to have to say it like this, but we don't need just anything. We need a hit. A smash hit, ladies and gentlemen. Betty crossed her arms in front of her chest and went into sulk mode. She didn't agree at all with the way Newman evaluated topics. I knew that. In her opinion, he simply had no instinct for what people really wanted to read. Suggesting ideas to him was like a game of chance. Newman rolled back and forth in his office chair. That's enough for me now. Get out of here. We'll meet again the day after tomorrow. And then I want topics that make me cry with joy. Got it? The editors quickly jumped up and hurried out of the meeting room. Lily, you stay, Newman barked unpleasantly loudly to drown out the conversations between his colleagues. Oh no, I thought to myself, and instinctively ducked my head and turned on my heel. Betty looked at me full of pity and rushed outside with the others. Everyone wanted to get to safety quickly before it hit them too. Sit down and learn, Newman demanded, and dug a dark red file out of his worn brown leather bag. Someone closed the door. Damn, I thought to myself, alone with Newman, and that early in the morning. Hesitantly, I took a seat next to my boss so that we were now sitting together across the corner. I looked out of the window. Berlin Mitte was a dull, cold soup kitchen on this November day. The top of the television tower on the horizon was covered in thick fog. The silver sphere and the long shaft jutted into the sky like a giant lollipop. Drizzle drummed softly against the windows of the editorial building, which also housed a TV station and sister papers. There was a subtle smell of cleaning agents in the air. What do people want to read? Asked the editor-in-chief in the tone of a stern teacher. I sighed and looked up at the ceiling for help. Why did I, of all people, have to be unlucky enough to get a lesson from the boss? Something interesting, I said. An exciting story. Very true, my dear, grinned Newman, taking off his glasses and cleaning them carefully with a white cloth. Now, I want to let you in on a little secret. There are stories like that. Yes, there are. You can count on it. We don't know them, but they do exist. So the challenge for us is to get hold of them. Do you understand? I furrowed my brow. Well, yes, but not quite. What I'm saying is that it's important to have the right sources, the right informants, whistleblowers, traitors, those kind of guys. He put his glasses back on and looked at me penetratingly. It's important to be well connected, Lily. Start early. Your network is much more important in the end than your talent as a journalist. Honestly, I mean it. What good is the best writer if they don't have anything exciting to report? I was still at the beginning of my career, but I wasn't exactly thrilled that my boss thought I was a complete novice. Of course I knew how important contacts and good sources were. Newman touched the dark red folder on the table with the flat of his hand. It looked a bit like he was stroking it. Strange. What I have here, my dear, could be a mega hit. A mega hit. The scoop of the year. He looked at me seriously, and I had to swallow, because although Newman liked to exaggerate, he didn't give the impression at that moment that he was playing things up. There was no doubt that he was completely serious about what he was saying. "Ah, the Hitler Diaries!" I asked with feigned awe to take the gravity out of the situation. Newman looked at me indulgently. "Ha! You have a sense of humour, Lily. But honestly, I've been on the trail of a red-hot story. Through my network, someone called me." He looked at me like a man who was now waiting to be praised and admired. I knew that look. "Wow," I said, smiling secretly because I hadn't done him the favour of gazing at him in admiration. "The story has everything a top scandal needs. Sex, politics, rich, powerful men, young, beautiful women, secrecy, breaking taboos, and so on and so forth," Newman added. "Sounds exciting. What would the headline be?" I thought it was funny that now it was me who was asking for the headline. "Watch out," said Newman excitedly, drawing a bold headline in the air with both hands. "Revealed. The secret of the Dom Hotel." "Dom Hotel?" "Dom Hotel," nodded Newman. "Sounds good, doesn't it?" "What happens in this Dom Hotel?" I wanted to know, and moved my chair a little closer to him. The story did sound exciting, but why was he telling me of all people? And in private, too. "I don't know for sure yet, but as far as I understand it, some top politicians and rich managers have set up a hotel in Berlin where there's a girl to go with every room, as a bedtime treat, so to speak." Newman grinned. I grimaced demonstratively, because I didn't like it when women were treated like a commodity. "So, a hotel with prostitutes?" "Yes, a hotel with... My God, what a terrible word," he grimaced. "Let's say whores. That doesn't sound nice either, but it's still better than prostitutes. No, well, that sounds like officialese." "Can you have a look at the hotel?" I asked. "Without further ado," Newman evaded my question. "It's not a public hotel, but a kind of private club, exclusively for members only. And the whores aren't normal whores either, but, well..." He looked at me thoughtfully, and suddenly didn't seem so sure of himself after all. "I don't know if you're at all familiar with these things, but as a journalist, you'll have to deal with such things. You do realise that, don't you, Lily?" "Hello, I'm not a little girl anymore," I laughed. Newman pushed his glasses up and looked at me. "You know, Lily, I don't want to offend you, but, well, if I know correctly, you work as a model on the side. You were even featured in this catalogue, in this..." "Mademoiselle," I added. "But these were very serious photos. Quilted jackets for the fall. No lingerie or anything like that," I quickly added. Newman smiled to himself and grinned. "Well, I just want to say that you are undoubtedly an extremely attractive young lady. 23 years old, right?" 24, you charmer." Newman smiled again, and I immediately realised that he had deliberately estimated me to be a year younger, the old fox. A man with his experience knew what women wanted to hear. "Young, attractive, slim, small snub nose, full lips, golden curly hair. You are the perfect person for this job, dear Lily." "Stop buttering me up already. Speak up. What kind of job is that?" Newman's smile disappeared in an instant. "All right, it's a shades of grey thing. Sadomaso, Lily. The dark side of lust." "Oh, that's great. Really now?" "Yes, that's just it. It could be a mega story, and we have it exclusively if we do it cleverly. The fine sirs live mainly in Hamburg, Dusseldorf, Munich, and Stuttgart. When they're in Berlin on business, they stay in this hotel and have fun with submissive, beautiful women." "Oh la la," I said, tossing my long hair back in delight. "Submissive, beautiful women. So it really is a shades of grey store." Newman nodded. "That's right." "Madness. When this comes out..." "Then the Republic will be shaken, and some marriages too." He looked out of the window.